I was carrying my cold boss's twins, and she was still hunting for the stranger who used to be me. 6 months earlier, I was rehearsing how to disappear in a bathroom mirror that had not been cleaned since the last time Voss Meridian posted a quarterly loss, which according to the breakroom gossip had never happened. My blazer was my sister's, 2 sizes off in the shoulders. My badge said temporary in red letters, stamped diagonally across my photo, as if the company needed to warn people I might vanish at any moment. I practiced my name in the glass, Ren Ashby, accounts reconciliation, 6-week contract, until it stopped sounding like an apology. It still sounded like one when Marnie Cole said it out loud for the first time. Ren Ashby. She read it off my badge the way you'd read an ingredient you were allergic to. Cute. Is that a real name or something you picked out of a coupon? I told her it was real. She told the break room I probably printed the badge myself in the copy room, and everyone laughed the specific laugh of people who have never once had to borrow a blazer. I put my head down and reconciled 1,000 rows of shipping manifests before lunch, because that was the one thing in my life that behaved the way it was supposed to. Numbers didn't lie. People did. I had learned that lesson 3 years earlier, at 19, standing in a hospital corridor while a doctor explained what a failing kidney meant for a 17-year-old named Mari, who loved sunflowers and had never once asked me for anything. I had learned it again every month since, watching a debt collector's number light up my phone like a countdown clock I could never quite silence. So I temped. I reconciled. I disappeared into other companies' numbers so my own life could stay solvent 1 more week, and I did not think about the Astor mask, or the mask I still had folded in tissue paper at the bottom of my one good bag, or the low voice that had told me at 1:45 midnight 9 weeks earlier that names complicated things. I did not think about it until the 2nd week of my contract, when I found an $11 million hole in a vendor ledger that 11 senior auditors had walked straight past, and Voss Meridian's chief of staff came down to the temp floor in person to ask which one of us had flagged file 4471. Ela Reyes had the build of someone who had once broken up a warehouse fight with her bare hands and the patience of someone who no longer needed to. She read my name off the flag comment, looked at my temporary badge, and said nothing at all for 4 full seconds. Then she said the words that ended the version of my life where nobody upstairs knew I existed. She wants to see you. Now, the elevator to the 40th floor climbed through 30 stories of glass and cold light while my reflection tried to look like it belonged there. It didn't. Neither did I. By the time the doors opened onto a hallway with more marble in it than my entire hometown, my heart was doing the thing it had done exactly once before, at a masquerade 9 weeks ago, when a stranger in a silver half mask had looked at me like I was the only unsolved equation in the room. The doors to the corner office were open. A woman stood at the window with her back to me, dark suit, spine like a drawn bowstring, and the whole floor went quiet around her the way a room goes quiet around weather. "Ms. Ashby," she said, without turning, "tell me why an $11 million discrepancy sat in my books for 4 months and nobody noticed but the temp." I opened my mouth to answer. She turned around, and the scent hit me first, the way it always had, smoked amber and glacier melt, cold enough to ache, dark enough to remember with my whole body before my mind caught up. Adair Voss. The Voss wall, the woman half the city called unmarriageable behind gilded doors, and the other half called untouchable to her face. The woman I had spent 9 weeks trying very hard not to think about, standing 8 feet away from me in a corner office at the top of a building I had no business being inside of. She did not recognize me. Of course she didn't. I had worn a mask that night, and heavy jasmine oil over my own scent because the aster mask required it, and she had never seen my face in daylight. But something in her stilled. One beat, no more, before she gestured me toward the chair across from her desk like nothing had happened at all. The discrepancy, she said again. I made myself breathe. I made myself talk numbers. Because numbers were the one language I had never once stuttered in, not even in that office, not even 8 feet from the last woman who had ever made me forget my own name. It's not a discrepancy, I said. It's 3 shell vendors routing through the same shipping account under different names. Somebody built it slow so it wouldn't trip the audit flags. I only caught it because the invoice numbers skip in a pattern that doesn't happen by accident. For the first time since I'd walked in, Adair Voss looked directly at me and did not look away. Show me, she said. I showed her. 40 minutes later, she had canceled 2 meetings, dismissed her assistant, and moved me, badge, contract, and all, onto her own floor, under her own authority, with a title that no longer said temporary on it. I told myself it was because of the numbers. I told myself that all the way down in the elevator, hand pressed flat against a stomach that had, as of 6 days earlier, started keeping a secret twice the size of any I had ever kept before. Twins. The doctor's word. Not mine. I still hadn't found a way to make it sound like anything but the ending of the only safe life I had left. My new desk sat close enough to Adair Voss's office that I could hear her voice through the wall when meetings ran hot, and far enough that I told myself the arrangement was purely professional. The floor called her by her surname the way other buildings call thunder by its weather report. A fact, a warning, never a person. Ela called her something closer to a verdict. In 9 years, she told me on my 3rd day, refilling my untouched coffee with the brisk efficiency of someone performing a kindness she'd deny under oath, she's canceled exactly 1 meeting for a person instead of a crisis. That was Tuesday. For you. I told Ela she was mistaken. Ila looked at me the way you look at someone standing directly under a chandelier they haven't noticed is loose. The proof of care started small enough that I could pretend it wasn't happening. A ginger tea appeared on my desk the 2nd week, unlabeled, the same brand my body had started begging for since the nausea began. I never told anyone I preferred ginger to peppermint. A standing lamp replaced the flickering overhead bulb above my chair within a day of me mentioning, once, in passing, that fluorescent light gave me headaches. When I fainted, not fainted at my desk at 11 in the morning, dizzy from skipping breakfast because the smell of eggs had become an enemy, it was Adair Voss's hand that caught my elbow before I hit the floor, and Adair Voss's voice, low and precise, with something under the ice that I did not have a name for yet, that said my name like it belonged to her already. Wren, not Ashby. Not Miss Ashby, just the name, Bear, the way you'd say something you were afraid to break. Sit down before you fall down. I sat. She crouched in front of me in a $2,000 suit without a single thought for the carpet, and for 3 full seconds I forgot every reason I had for keeping her at arm's length, because up close, with her pulse working visibly at her throat, she smelled like smoked amber and glacier melt, and my whole body remembered a candlelit room 9 weeks and 1 life ago. "You're pale," she said. "Have you eaten today?" "I'm fine." That wasn't the question. I told her I'd get something from the cafeteria. She told me she'd have something sent up instead, and 20 minutes later, a tray arrived with dry toast, ginger tea, and, inexplicably, precisely a small dish of plain crackers, the only thing that had stayed down for me in 2 weeks, though I had never once mentioned that to a living soul in this building. I stared at the tray until Isla, passing my desk, paused long enough to say 4 words that undid something in my chest. She asked the cafeteria. Twice, I told myself it was competence. Adair Voss ran her empire on details other people missed. Of course, she noticed a junior analyst skipping meals. I told myself that story for 3 more weeks. Through the wealth gap tour of a building where the top floor had its own weather system of hushed voices and deferential doors, through sneering glances from executives who couldn't understand why the temp had a parking space now, through evenings when I stayed late reconciling the Shell vendor trail and looked up to find her still in her office too. Jacket off, sleeves rolled, working in a silence that felt less like distance and more like company. I told myself the story until the night I found the corkboard. I had gone looking for a stapler in the executive floor's supply alcove, past a door I'd assumed was a closet, and found instead a narrow room with one wall covered in printouts, grainy security stills from a masquerade ballroom, a guest list with most names crossed out, a single line of copperplate handwriting photographed close enough to read, for the woman who wore the silver mask and left before the candles died. If you have any information, contact this office directly. Pinned in the corner, behind glass, was a torn page from a discretion book. No name on it, just a small hand-drawn bird in flight, wings spread mid-motion, inked in a hurry by someone who hadn't wanted to be found. I had drawn that bird myself, at midnight, 9 weeks and 6 days ago. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake doing the math I was best at, the only kind that had ever mattered to me. How many weeks since the mask? How many weeks since the blood test? How many days until a woman who kept a locked shrine to a stranger she couldn't find realized the stranger had been sitting 8 feet from her office for a month, carrying 2 heartbeats that were half hers and didn't know it yet? I thought about walking into her office and simply saying it. I thought about it every night for 2 more weeks, and every night I found a reason to stay quiet. Because some griefs, I was learning, keep better in the dark than they do in daylight. The reason I finally almost told her had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with a hurricane warning nobody at Voss Meridian had bothered to take seriously until the building's east tower lost power at 6:12 in the evening, stranding a skeleton crew of 9 people on the 40th floor, while sheets of rain turned the windows into something closer to ocean than glass. Isla evacuated everyone she could reach down the working stairwell. Adair Voss stayed to shut down the trading floor's backup servers by hand because an automated failure at Voss Meridian's scale meant real money and real jobs. And I stayed because I had been 3 data points from finishing the Shell vendor trail, and some stubborn, self-punishing part of me refused to leave numbers half-solved. By 8 o'clock, the storm had the building groaning at its joints, and the 2 of us had the whole floor to ourselves, working by emergency lighting that turned everything the amber of an old photograph. She brought me a blanket from somewhere without being asked. I caught the scent of it before I saw her hand, smoked amber and glacier melt, closer now than it had been since a ballroom I still dreamed about. "You should be home," she said. "So should you. I don't have one of those. I have a building." She said it flat, without self-pity, the way you'd report a fact about the weather, and something in the plainness of it cracked me open more than tears would have. "What's your excuse?" Numbers I couldn't leave unfinished. I hesitated, and I don't love being alone in the dark. Old habit. She was quiet long enough that I thought the conversation had ended. Then, low, almost to herself, I used to hate being anywhere but alone. "It's cleaner. Nobody expects anything from you in an empty room. That sounds lonely." "It is." She looked at me then. Really looked, the way she had the very first day, and I watched something move behind her eyes, like a door easing off its latch. You ask questions like you already know the answers are going to hurt somebody. Only when I'm right. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. The ghost of the shape one might someday become. She sat on the edge of the desk across from mine, close enough that the stormlight caught the line of her jaw, and for a long moment neither of us said anything at all, and the silence between us was not empty the way her empty rooms apparently were. It was full. It hummed. "Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone in this building?" she said. "Yes, there's a woman I've been looking for since spring. One night. A mask and a room full of candles, and she left before I could ask her a single real question." Her hand found the edge of the desk and pressed flat against it, the same gesture I'd seen her make once before, thumb dragging slow against wood the way other people wring their hands. I built a company out of never needing anyone twice, and I have not stopped thinking about a woman whose name I don't even have. My mouth went dry. The twins chose that exact moment to move, a small, unmistakable flutter low in my stomach, the first time I had felt it, and I pressed my hand there on reflex, breath catching hard enough that Adair noticed immediately, alarm sharpening her voice. "Ren, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." My voice came out unsteady. "Nothing is wrong. I need to tell you something." I got as far as it was me forming behind my teeth when the emergency lights flickered, died, and the stairwell door banged open 3 floors down, with Isla's voice shouting up through the dark that a live wire had come down across the east entrance and everyone needed to move to the west stair immediately. The moment didn't survive the interruption. By the time we were both safely on the ground floor, soaked and adrenaline strung, Adair had folded the ice back over herself so completely that I couldn't find the woman who had just told me about candles and an empty room, and I told myself it was for the best. I told myself that lie all the way home. I did not tell her the following week either, though I tried twice, and lost my nerve twice, because it is one thing to imagine confessing to a stranger's memory, and another to say it out loud to a woman who signed your paycheck and had begun, somewhere in the last 6 weeks, to matter to me in ways that had nothing to do with money at all. What I got instead of courage was Delphine Ashgrove, standing in my office doorway on a Thursday afternoon, with a smile calibrated to look kind from across a room and cruel from 3 feet away. "You must be the new favorite," she said, before I'd offered her a chair. "Ren, isn't it? I make it a policy to know everyone who's canceled 3 of Adair's meetings in a month." She let the silence sit, tasting it. "That's not a compliment, by the way. That's an inventory." Delphine sat on the corner of my desk the way a cat settles somewhere it hasn't been invited, unhurried, certain of its welcome. Board vice chair, I knew that much. Her family's holding company had been circling a merger with Voss Meridian for 2 years, and rumor on the executive floor put her and Adair together at every gala since they were both 19. An arrangement made by parents who called it legacy and everyone else called it a leash. "I hear you found the Shell vendor trail," she said. "Clever girl. Ambitious, too, I'd guess, coming up from the temp pool that fast." Her eyes dropped, just once, to the loose cut of my blazer, the way I'd started dressing to hide a shape that wouldn't stay hidden much longer. Or is ambition the wrong word? My stomach dropped somewhere colder than fear. "I don't know what you mean. I think you do." Delphine's voice never rose. It didn't need to. "I've known Adair since we were children. I know what she looks like when she's protecting something. She's never looked at an employee the way she looks at you, Miss Ashby, and I find myself wondering what, exactly, she thinks she's protecting." She left before I could answer, which I understood, even then was the point. She hadn't come to threaten me. She'd come to let me know she was watching, and to remind me, in that calm clinical register villains use when they've already decided how a story ends, that some secrets cost more the longer you sit on them. I sat on mine 3 more weeks anyway, because fear is a patient architect, and it had already built me a life out of disappearing before anyone could ask for more than I had to give. The scars came out the same night Adair told me about her mother. We had fallen, without either of us naming it, into a rhythm, late dinners in her office that started as working meals and stopped pretending to be about work somewhere around the 2nd week of October. That night, it was soup she'd had sent up, because I'd mentioned once that my stomach only tolerated broth after 4 in the afternoon, and she'd remembered the way she seemed to remember everything I said as if she were filing it somewhere permanent. My mother built this company on one rule, she said, turning her spoon without eating from it. Never let them see what you need. She used to say it like scripture. Weakness is anything they can use against you, and love is the biggest weakness there is. She looked up. I believed her for a long time. What changed? Someone I loved got hurt because of who I was, and I decided the safest thing I could do for anyone who mattered was never let them matter that much again. Her thumb found the edge of the desk, dragged once, slow. Her name was Petra. She worked 2 floors below me. Delphine's family made sure the board believed she'd leaked confidential filings to a rival. She hadn't. I found the proof 18 months too late, but by the time I could clear her name, she'd already left the city, and I never got the chance to say I was sorry, or that I never doubted her, because I did, for one unforgivable week, and she knew it. I reached across the space between us and put my hand over hers before I decided to. She didn't pull away. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. It taught me control was the only thing that couldn't betray me. Her eyes came up, dark and unguarded in a way I had never once seen on the 40th floor. Then a woman in a silver mask told me I looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, and I spent one night forgetting every rule my mother ever gave me, and I have spent every day since wondering if I imagined how much that mattered. You didn't imagine it, I said, before I could stop myself. Something shifted in her face, not quite recognition, not yet, but close enough that my pulse roared in my ears. How would you know that? I opened my mouth. This was it. This was the moment, and I had rehearsed it 100 times lying awake, and every rehearsed version dissolved the second her eyes were actually on me, waiting. Because, I said, anyone can tell when a feeling is real. You don't have to have been there. It wasn't the truth. It was the closest I could get without falling off the edge of my own courage, and she let it stand, though something in her expression told me she'd heard the door I hadn't opened. I told her about Mari that night instead, the kidney, the debt, the sunflowers on the windowsill of a hospital room I couldn't always afford to keep well lit, and she listened the way she read a ledger, completely, like every detail was load-bearing. 2 days later, a delivery arrived at Mari's hospital room. No card, no name, a standing arrangement of sunflowers renewed weekly, and a note in the nurse's log that all outstanding balances on the account had been quietly settled. I hadn't told her the hospital's name. I hadn't told her Mari's last name. I understood, sitting with the receipt in my shaking hands, that Adair Voss made it her business to know everything about people she'd decided to protect, and the understanding terrified me exactly as much as it undid me. I was still holding that receipt 3 days later when Delphine Ashgrove destroyed the ground I was standing on. She did it in the cafeteria, at lunch, in front of enough witnesses to make sure it traveled. She set a manila folder on the table where I was eating alone and opened it without asking permission. A printed hospital intake form with my name on it, a blood panel, a single circled word that turned the whole room's noise into a ringing silence in my ears. "Twins," Delphine said, pleasant as poured cream. "Congratulations. I do wonder who the father is. Or should I say, the other mother?" Her gaze cut, deliberate, toward the glass wall of Adair's office 2 floors up, visible from where we sat. It would be quite a story for the business page. CEO's secret pregnant mistress, hired off the temp floor. The board would love it right before a merger vote. Investors do so hate surprises. The room had gone very quiet. I could feel Marnie Cole 2 tables over, phone already half raised. I could feel every eye that had once decided I was nobody worth noticing deciding, in real time, that I was worth noticing now, for all the worst reasons. "You don't know anything," I managed. "I know enough." Delphine leaned in, voice dropping to something almost gentle, which was somehow worse than cruelty. "Resign quietly by Friday, and this stays in a folder. Stay, and I make sure Adair Voss's name is in every headline in this city by Monday, alongside yours, alongside a story about a scheming temp who got herself pregnant to climb a corporate ladder. She built this company out of never being weak in public. I would hate for you to be the thing that finally breaks her." I did not tell Adair that Delphine had cornered me. I told myself I was protecting her, and maybe some of that was even true, but underneath the noble reasoning was a much older, much smaller fear. The fear that if Adair Voss ever found out the pregnant stranger from the mask and the temp on her payroll were the same worn-out, second-hand blazer woman, she would look at me the way the whole cafeteria just had. Like a problem, like a story about to break. So I packed. I did it that night, badge on the desk, the sunflower receipt folded into my bag beside a torn discretion book page I'd never had the nerve to ask her to return. I left a resignation letter that said nothing true, and I stood in the parking garage at 11:47 at night, twins pressing low and constant against my ribs, and let myself cry the way I hadn't let myself cry since the day a doctor first said the word twins, because I understood, standing there, that I was about to disappear from the one life I hadn't wanted to disappear from at all. I was 3 steps from my car when headlights swept the garage and a familiar black sedan cut across 2 empty spaces to block my exit. Ela Reyes got out first, expression carved from granite. "You didn't think you'd get out of the building without the badge scanner flagging it, did you?" Ela, she's been in that office for 2 hours going through everything Delphine Ashgrove has ever touched, Ila said, because a locked drawer that's had 1 page missing since April suddenly has a match for the handwriting sitting 3 feet from her office in every audit note you've ever filed. You didn't think a woman who reconciles 41,000 rows for fun was going to keep her own handwriting a secret forever, did you? My knees went weak enough that I had to put a hand on the car door. "She knows," I said. "She's known for about 90 minutes. Ila's voice gentled, fractionally, the closest thing to warmth I'd ever gotten from her. "She also knows Delphine Ashgrove has been laundering board funds through the same shell vendors you flagged in your first week, propping up her family's collapsing holding company, and threatened you into silence to keep both secrets buried until the merger vote Monday. Adair doesn't do things halfway, Ren. She's not looking for the woman from the mask anymore. A beat. She's looking for you. Get back in the building." The elevator ride to the 40th floor was the longest 90 seconds of my life. The doors opened on Adair Voss standing exactly where she'd stood the first day I met her, at the window, spine like a drawn bowstring. Except this time when she turned around her eyes were wet, and the room around her didn't go quiet from fear. It went quiet from something closer to reverence. On the desk behind her sat the torn discretion book page, no longer behind glass, and beside it every audit file I had ever filed, corners marked in the same hurried bird in flight doodle I'd drawn 100 times without noticing I was doing it. "Tell me it's true," she said. Her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't anything I'd heard from her before, raw, unrehearsed, a woman with no ice left between herself and the question. "Tell me you're the one who told me to stay until the candles died." "It's me," I said. "It was always me." She crossed the room in 4 strides and stopped a foot away, close enough that smoked amber and glacier melt wrapped around me whole, close enough that I could see her hands were shaking. "You let me hunt for you for 4 months. You sat 8 feet from my office." I was scared. My voice broke. I was scared of exactly this, of you finding out I was never a mystery worth keeping, just a temp with a sister's blazer and somebody else's debt, and my hand went to my stomach without my permission. And 2 heartbeats I didn't know how to tell you about. Something in her face cracked open entirely. "Twins. Yours," I said. "I should have told you the storm night. I should have told you 100 times before that. You're telling me now." Her hand came up, slow, giving me every chance to step back. I didn't. Her fingers found my jaw, careful as a question. "Tell me to stop, and I will." "Don't stop." She kissed me the way she'd looked at me since the very first day, like I was the one unsolved equation she'd spend the rest of her life working out, and never grow tired of. And when she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing unsteady in the amber emergency light of an office that had, somewhere in the last 4 months, stopped feeling like a fortress and started feeling like the beginning of a home. "We still have Delphine," she said against my mouth, low and Monday. "Then let's make sure Monday ends the way it should." We spent what was left of that night at Adair's dining table, laptops and ledgers between us instead of dinner, building the case the only way I knew how, number by number, invoice by invoice, until the $11 million hole from my first week connected clean through 9 shell vendors to a single holding account under Delphine Ashgrove's mother's maiden name. Isla pulled the recording from the cafeteria's overhead system without needing to be asked twice. Adair's legal team had it authenticated by 2 a.m. By sunrise we had, laid out across the table like a battlefield map, everything Delphine had spent 2 years building a wall around. "You could bury her quietly," I said, watching Adair read the final summary with an expression gone very still. "You have the power to make this disappear without a single headline." "I could." She looked up. "Part of me wants to. My mother would have called that mercy for the family name. And you?" "I want her to answer for it in a room full of the people she's spent her life performing innocence in front of." A muscle worked in her jaw. "But I'll let the board handle her professionally. Prison, if the fraud charges hold, which they will. Not, I won't let this become something uglier than it needs to be. Not with you watching. Not with them watching." Her hand found mine over the ledger, steady now. "You stopped me from becoming the kind of person my mother raised. I'd like to keep it that way." Monday's board meeting filled every seat and half the standing room along the back wall, drawn by rumor and merger anxiety in equal measure. Delphine arrived in cream silk, composed as a held note, and took her usual seat at Adair's left, with the easy confidence of a woman who had spent a lifetime believing consequences were things that happened to other people. Adair let her get 3 sentences into her opening remarks about shareholder confidence before setting a single folder on the table between them. "Before we vote," Adair said, "I'd like the board to hear a recording." Delphine's smile did not move for the first 4 seconds of her own voice playing back through the room's speakers, "Resign quietly by Friday." Or, "I make sure her name is in every headline in this city," and by the 6th second it had gone the particular shade of white that money can't buy back. I stood when Adair nodded to me and walked the board through the shell vendor trail on the projector screen the same way I'd walked Adair through it 4 months earlier, invoice number by invoice number. Until the pattern that 11 senior auditors had missed sat undeniable in front of 40 of the city's sharpest financial minds. "Numbers don't lie," I said when I finished. "People do." The vote to remove Delphine Ashgrove from the board was unanimous. Building security escorted her out through the same lobby where, 4 months earlier, a coworker named Marnie Cole had once told the room at large that my badge looked homemade. Marnie, it turned out, had been feeding Delphine information about my file all along in exchange for a promotion that would now never come, and she was walked out an hour later with a box of desk items and a look on her face I recognized, because I had worn a version of it myself, once, in a cracked elevator mirror. The difference, I thought, watching her go, was that nobody had ever mocked her for something she couldn't control. She'd earned every inch of that walk. Adair found me on the observation deck an hour later, city spread out gold and glittering below us in the last of the daylight, and knelt on the concrete in a suit that cost more than my first year of rent and did not care at all about the knee of it. "I spent 4 months hunting for a stranger," she said, "and I found the only home I've ever wanted. I don't have a ring that means anything yet, because I wasn't planning on asking anyone anything for the rest of my life until 3 days ago. But I have this." She held up a small velvet box, and inside it sat not a ring, but a tiny pin, wings spread mid-flight, the exact shape of a bird drawn in a hurry by a woman who hadn't wanted to be found. "I want to spend the rest of it finding you on purpose, every single day. Marry me. Bond with me. Let me build every room in every home we have around the sound of your voice." "Yes," I said, before she'd finished the last word, and she laughed. Actually laughed, bright and startled, and young in a way the whole city had never once heard from the Voss wall, and kissed me until the sun went all the way down. The bonding took place on a small terrace 6 weeks later, close friends only, Isla standing witness with an expression she'd deny ever making, Mari in a wheelchair with a blanket of sunflowers across her knees, laughing at something Adair had whispered to her privately that made her look, for the first time in 3 years, entirely unafraid for her sister's future. Adair asked me in front of everyone the same question she'd asked in the emergency light of a dead-powered office months before. "Tell me to stop and I will." "Don't stop," I said, and she bit the claiming mark into the curve of my throat with a gentleness that undid every hard year that had come before it, and the bond that opened between us afterward felt like a door that had been locked my whole life finally swinging wide. 6 months on, the twins arrived 2 minutes apart at 4:03 and 4:05 in the morning, a girl and a boy, and Adair held them both at once with the particular terror and wonder of a woman who had spent a lifetime believing love was the one thing she couldn't afford. Discovering she'd been rich in it all along. Isla, holding the boy an hour later with the stiff, delighted awkwardness of a woman who'd sworn for 9 years she felt nothing for anyone, informed the room that she had never once seen Adair Voss cancel a full week of board meetings for anything short of a hostile takeover, and here she was, having canceled too. A year on, the nursery window caught the morning light the way the office window used to catch the storm, and above the twins' shared crib hung a small mobile Adair had commissioned, without telling me, a dozen tiny birds in flight, wings spread mid-motion, turning slow and golden in the early sun. I used to believe that the safest thing a woman like me could do was stay unseen, smaller, quieter, easier to overlook than to love. I have since learned that being seen, fully and on purpose by someone who chooses you again every single morning is not a danger at all. It is the only kind of safety that ever actually holds. The end.